Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my weekly Node-RED core development live stream. Here we are. Running a little bit late, but thank you for joining. Rebel49, Noxy Boy, great to see you in the chat already. Do say hi if you've just joined. It's going to be 90 minutes or so, give or take. Of some sort of core Node-RED development. One of the reasons my comments late starting is I've just been scratching around trying to work out what I'm going to do tonight. I've spent the last few days ticking off lots of small things in the core of Node-RED, getting ready for the 2.1 beta that we'll release later this week. And I just sort of realised late this afternoon I've kind of dried up of all the minor little things that were all awesome things to do on the live stream, but I've kind of knocked them off the list. So I thought, well, okay, why don't we go back? So a couple of weeks ago, if you remember, if you were here on the live stream, or you can catch up on the YouTube, Twitch archive, I started hacking around the switch node to allow you to do compound rules, where you can have rules that are combinations of multiple tests, multiple properties. So I thought, okay, let's pick that up, because I've not really poked at that much since the last live stream. It's not on my priority list for 2.1. And unfortunately, it seems like I've lost all that work that I did that evening. It looks like I failed to actually commit it to a branch. I think I did a git stash, and then just in the course of events, I think I've managed to lose it. It might still be lurking somewhere in a corner of a git stash somewhere, but yeah, I doubt half an hour of me doing git digital forensics to try and find that work is going to be interesting. I'm not too, it's a little frustrating, but in some ways, when I was doing that work, I was talking very much about the idea of sometimes for some of these things where you're not clear on what the UI should look like, you've just got to break ground and start hacking things around. Whilst that work didn't come to a great conclusion, it's true to say I could go watch the video and I could go see what changes I made. But one of the reasons I didn't do more work on it was it wasn't quite feeling right. I didn't have a clear picture of what I wanted to get to. So, it's not disastrous that work has evaporated somewhere. We'll give it another go, but perhaps certainly not for the 2.1 beta this week. Maybe if inspiration strikes, we'll pick it up and it'll get into a subsequent beta in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, but there you go. Such is life. Such is the fun of developing a dozen different things at once. So I haven't got a clear, definite thing to work on this evening. I've got a few bits and pieces that I might want to get into. Noxboy asks in the chat, if I switch to this screen, and then just go over here, so you can see the chat as well. Noxboy, would it be possible to make a CLI tool to take a subflow and make a custom node from it? That is that is something being thought about. If we look in the family of Node-RED projects we've got, Node-RED Node-Gen. So this is a command line tool that's been around for ages, that originally started as a way to create a Node-RED node from a function node. So you give it the code in a function node and it would package it up as a proper NPM node. And over time it has grown to support OpenAPI specs, Web of Things, all these interesting, slightly academic ways of generating nodes. The downside, and again the way it's been approached, is some of those, like the OpenAPI and the Web of Things, they aren't necessarily as mainstream as perhaps they could be, they add a huge amount of dependencies to this tool. The dependency list has grown ridiculously large. I think for some reason it does stuff with icons. So it's got GIMP, which is a image manipulation library, which is huge. And anyway, so as originally conceived, NodeGen would have been that command line tool that it would make sense to us to add support for converting a subflow into a proper module as part of NodeGen. It's heavy, this tool. I haven't really come to a good conclusion on that. So yeah, that's one end of things. I will say there is work in progress coming from our friends at Hitachi to somewhere in here. Here, add support of exporting subflow modules. So Nishiyama-san is doing some work at the moment to add a button in the UI to give you a one-click download of the subflow as a npm module tgz file. Now it's got that stuff is pretty much okay. He's also been doing some work around encrypting of flow contents, which frankly I'm not a fan of. I think it overcomplicates things, and yeah, it needs more thought and rework. So unfortunately, because he's lumped those two together, it's hard to separate those two out now, because this is now quite a huge pull request touching 26 files. Which that's not going to get into 2.1 at this rate. So anyway, so we have that. In terms of stuff I've been up to, like I said, I've done a whole bunch of pull requests over the last few days. Very consciously trying to do more via pull requests than just committing directly to pushing commits direct, just because it helps me keep a nice list of actual functional units, the pull requests that have actually been merged. So that's fun. Today I spent a bunch of time improving our unit test coverage, because our coverage had dropped down. Now, it was slightly dispiriting. I spent a couple of hours getting a few more files up to 100% coverage. So I pushed raised this pull request with those changes in. Lots of good changes in here. And then coveralls tells me, yes, okay, well done for increasing like 3 or 4 files up to 100%. But overall, you've increased your coverage by 0.6%. So really not the impact I was hoping. I've said before, the fact our code coverage stats have dropped down to below, we had them up high 80s, low 90%, not a couple of years ago, and just we've let it. I have let it slide, which is not good. So anyway, lots of waffle. What are we actually going to do tonight? I mean, if there's anything in the chat you guys would like to see me work on or talk about or play with, then do shout. Otherwise, I think there's for those who haven't been around that long, so this is our Trello board, the one that Dave and I use just to throw up when there are good suggestions for features that perhaps we aren't ready just to start working on. This we use as the backlog. Some high level concepts, some low level features. So whenever I'm in need of inspiration of something to do, I tend to dip into this to see is there anything on this list that makes sense. And as we scroll through it, it's sort of organised by the runtime, the editor, nodes, subflows, context, sort of big functional areas, the projects feature. And then there's these columns at the end, which sort of say stuff we are looking at. So the done column is a whole bunch of stuff. Some don't always remember to keep it up to date, so there tends to be a bit of a lag sometimes on the done column. But and this next is stuff that are candidates for 2.1 but haven't got around to doing yet. So often I just sort of come in, dip in here, and so a lot of this you'll recognise if you spend time in the forum when people suggest stuff and I say, I've put it on the backlog. It means I've thrown a card up here somewhere I've thrown a card up here. So what shall we do? Well, given last week, was it only last week? I spent some time on the link cool node. Was that last week's stream? I think it was, wasn't it? All gone then, Steve, what you're saying. I'd like to see a change switch node inherit previous entry when add is clicked. And can change the typed input to message type and perhaps a duplicate button alongside the X button. Interesting. That an interesting suggestion. Okay. Okay. I will take that challenge. Let's see, what have we got? Let me just get things back to... So you can see here, I have a branch, compound switch rules. So as I was saying at the start, all that work I did, but if I look at the history, there's just no commits in this branch. This branch is the same as dev. So I've got the branch, but just no commits with code in it, which is a real shame. But anyway, let's go back to dev. Let's just make sure. Okay. So especially the switch node, Steve says in the chat there. So let's have a look at that then. Let's wait for that to load up. So let's just see what Steve is talking about here. I'm just going to deploy that. So let's say this is funny. Okay, so given we talked about overhauling the switch node UI, then let's carry on. So let's say this is a switch node, so we want going to test message.payload against, all right, let's say it's flow.1, and then this one I want to be flow.2, but you can see okay, so that's probably a more realistic example. You want to have it numbers 1 to 10, so you click add, you click number, you click type 1, you click add, to do number, and so on. And then that's assuming you don't want to have, let's say you wanted to do has key A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. So so Steve's suggestion is to have a way to duplicate one of these rules. So yes, we could add a button over here to duplicate. I think that's probably the right thing to do. Okay. You know what? I can tell you now that I'm going to end up making some similar changes to what I made in the stream a couple of weeks ago, because there's some UI optimizations to be made for sure in this UI. Let's work on making this better all round. So Steve's saying duplicate or, as for some apps you use, smart duplicate, it infers the previous entry. So if you click add and all the rules yeah, that's an interesting idea actually. Rather than trying to squeeze another button in, when you click add, it defaults to equals string. But it wouldn't take much to iterate over all the existing rules, and if they all have a particular type here, then we just pick up that same type. That would be useful, wouldn't it? And yeah. Yeah, so why don't we just do that? That's going to be a nice bit of low-hanging fruit. Let's or just copy the last entry. That's, yeah. Certainly for the type, that probably makes sense. Yeah, no need. Because how often is the switch node going to want to be, are you going to have multiple different types in here? Yeah. Now, the value we can't pre-fill. Sorry, you're right. Wouldn't it be interesting if we detect that all the values are numbers, and we detect so far we have a pattern in the numbers, then we can auto insert the value as well. Let's do one at a time. Hey, so cool. But like I said, I'm also going to take this opportunity to do a bit of UI rework, because I don't know if the stream.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
I don't know if the stream is showing up, but when I resize, the rule widths do dance around, and that's, yeah, that desperately needs tidying up and neatening. So, okay, absolutely baby steps. That's right, Noxy boy. You know, let's prove the concept in one place and then go from there. So, what we're going to do is, so here we are in the switch node code. Oh, hold on, let me move over so you can actually see it. Make it a bit bigger. Do the dance. Right. So here we're in the code for the switch node. Here's where it sets up the editable list. And here's the add item function. So this is what gets called each time you click the add button. And what this kind of does double duty. So at this point, opt by default will be an empty object. Let me just double check one thing before I. Yeah, so when we're opening up the edit dialog and it's pre-populating the editable list, then here we iterate over the rules of the node and we call add item with the rule, with an object that looks like this with R and I. When we click this button, and this button is actually a built-in component of editable list. So by default, editable list gives you this little plus button. Then it will call add item, and opt will be an empty object. So we can see that in action, or just confirm that's the case. Noxboy, you'd awesome feature, by the way. If you expand the sidebar out, as I prefer, large, remember that preference when the sidebar opens again. The sidebar. Yes, I was about to say, edit dialogues, we do remember if you make the edit dialog bigger, certainly within a single session, we do remember the width you last set a particular node's edit dialog. But if you mean the sidebar, then yeah, that's not something we remember currently. But anyway, so we've added that console.log. So here you can see we've when I open up this node, right, clean start, right. At blank console, we open up the node, then we've console.logged that first rule, and then when I click the button, you can see we get the empty object. So that means it's basically this if condition. If the opt hasn't got the R property, which is the rule, then it's initializing it to the empty one. And then there's further logic which sets the defaults. But what we can do here is this is where we're going to add our secret source. So let's just think about what logic we're going to start with here. What we're going to do is, well, we know that I is the index of this item. So we want to get item I minus 1. And of course, all of this is if I is greater than, in fact, why don't we just start writing it? If I is greater than 0, so we've already, because obviously if you're adding the first in the list, then there's nothing to copy. We go and get the last rule. And to get the last rule, we do editable list, and I can't remember what the function is to get a particular entry from the list is. Options, methods, yeah, there we are. Get item at I minus 1. So let's just console.log last rule to see what that looks like, because I've got a little bit of a bad feeling about this, but we'll. So when we open it up and we add a blank there, so it's logged. In fact, it's logged exactly what we want. The last item, which is a equals string. So if I were to change this to message.foo, delete that one again, clear the console. Now when I hit add, R is, ooh, so I've changed it to message.foo, but here you can see the rule still says equals string. That's because the entry in this list is still what it was when it got opened. It doesn't know that we've actually modified the entry. Okay. What we need is a utility function to say, given this entry in the list, give me the rule that that entry's configuration results in. Okay, so yeah, okay, this has turned into a bit of a can of worms, but we like cans of worms. So on edit save, this gets called when we save the edit dialog. We iterate over the rules, all the items in the table, and we export its rule. Well, we don't want to export everything every time, but what we're going to do is, what are we going to do? Let me just check. Okay. This has suddenly got very convoluted, but we're going to go for it. So we want to have a utility function that we can give it a we want a utility function, just as you say, Steve, in the chat. We want an internal function that, given an entry, can extract us the rule representation for it. So I'm just trying to find this. This is the code that does the magic, given the DOM element for the rule. And we'll come back to that in a sec. put something back here. So we'll have export rule element blah. In fact, yeah. We do all that, and then we should just be able to return R, which is the exported version. So let's go back down to where we had that to do put something back. So we're going to export rule. Oh no, what did we have? Rule data. Bear with me. I just need to. I forgot. I've lost the plumbing. Under all that. So, do we have to use rule data at all? No. Okay. Right. Take that this time. Line 423. Now let's paste that into our export rule. We pass rule in, this does all the work, then we return R. And then back down here, line, what do we say, 453, sorry. Export rule this. So that's made it nice reusable rule, which is goodness. But the problem is that export rule works by passing it the DOM element because it has to find all the find all the HTML inputs to extract the content. And this code, when I printed last rule, you can see it's given me the R and the I properties. I don't actually have a handle on the DOM element. So what we're going to do is cheat a bit, nothing wrong with cheating, and we're going to actually set opt.element to container, so that in memory it should now be the case if I refresh that. I run the switch node and change this to something, hit add. So now you can see in the console, if I keep it on the console, we've got RI, and now we've got the element, which is the DOM element containing all the form, or containing all the inputs. So now we can do export rule last rule dot element. What's that look like? So now when I hit, if I change this to flow dot something, I hit add, you can see we've got type equals value AWF value type flow. And if I now change this one, say, to something else, and I click add, you can see we've got global. So it is picking up the last one. If I delete that and then change this to number, click add, yeah, cool. So now we've got, so now we know the type of the previous thing. So we can say opt.r, and what do we want to set? We want to set what we're going to set. We're going to set the value type to the last rule dot value type. Okay, so fire up the switch. Let's change this to number. Hit add, and it's not done it. Okay. Why hasn't that done it? That should be setting the default VT. I'm just checking to see if there's, yeah, so down here is where we set the type to rule.vt, or we default to string if it's not been set. So is it possible that this line is not doing what I think it is? So why don't we down here do a console.log opt.r. Let's see what the rule looks like once we get past that block of code. So we change that to number, click add, VT undefined. Okay, so I've got this wrong. There's console.log last rule again. Set that to say number, click add. So here we've got what have I printed out? Last rule. So last rule, sorry, is the whole thing. So I need .r.vt. Yeah, okay, I was working at the wrong level of object. Okay, so now we change that to number. Click add. Oh, and it's still not done it. Okay. Something not working there. What's going wrong? Maybe try fully cloning the previous entry. Well, I don't know how useful it would be to copy the value, because you probably want to delete the value because you want it to be a different test. So okay, that's what is going on here. It's going to be something really stupid, I know, but let's same test as well. Okay, so it's setting it to, there I've got it set to the number type, and here it is setting it to the string, that is just wrong. Okay, what's going on? Oh, right, sorry. I forgot about I've deleted code. Right, we want to export rule, last rule. Yeah, all that stuff I did 5 minutes ago. Don't know where that went. I have to watch the replay and see at what point did I delete the vital piece of code that does the work we're trying to do. So let's set that to number, hit add, and it's right. This is Apologies if this is infuriating because you can see what I've gone wrong. Yeah, I don't know. This is one. Oops. This is why it happens. Control D and Control S are right next to each other, so I accidentally delete a line before I save. Let's set that to number. I hit add. Exported. Yeah, so exported T, V, and VT. So VT is num here. So exported. Right, exported dot VT. So opt.r.vt is now exported.vt, exported rule. Here you can see exported has VT set to num. No R, yeah. Right, do that. Still no. So exported VT is num. Here. Here VT is num. Interesting. So VT is num. Now it's gone back to string because that one was a string. Okay, but something's gone right here. So console.log setting type to rule.vt. Why is it the things that should be just, this shouldn't be complicated, this should just work. So I've set it to number, I hit add. Here you can see it says setting type to num. So suddenly at this point in code, VT is number type, but you can see quite plainly we've got, it's not been changed, it's still on string type. Okay, so let's go further down. Rule.vt, which gets set up somewhere. Sorry. Yeah, it's all this. I'm remembering more and more refactoring I did on the previous live stream that I kind of want to have in place right now, but we know right, VT, no, that's between, we don't want between, don't want head tail, we don't want its type, we don't want Java natural expression, not an undefined. You know, you have that moment where you're just questioning, how does this even work? How? Because where is it setting up the typed input field? Which field are we dealing with? We are dealing with the rule value. So this is the input. So it's being initialized with the default type of string, but that's okay. It's allowed to do that. Create value field. So value field. So where do we set the type of value field? Here. Oh, sorry. Okay, so it's not equal to undefined. So this is the right place to be. And we're setting the type to either rule.vt, or if that doesn't exist, to the string type. So let's just stick in a setting it to rule.vt. I don't like it when these, what should be simple, just takes time. So setting it to string, well that's okay because that one was a string. Let's set it to number now and hit add. Oh, and it hasn't done the set because v is undefined. Because v is the v property is undefined. We haven't initialized. Okay, this makes sense. Let's just tidy up. We were only setting the VT, the type property. What we're going to do is just initialize that to an empty value. I think that's okay. Yeah. So let's change this to number type. I hit add, and it's a number type. Awesome. Set it to JSON utter expression. I hit add, and we get a JSON utter expression. Awesome. Okay. So that's the first baby step. When you hit add, we now copy the previous rule type. I think someone said it in the chat, it'd be nice when you click add to automatically focus that input as well. Yeah. Can we do that meaningfully? No. Yeah, well, maybe. Just have to do it in the right place. Before I do that, I want to do some refactoring. I'm going to do, let's hide that, give myself some more space. Right. Going to do a bit of refactoring to tidy up the UI and make it lay out better. At the moment, there's an optimization. Each time we add an item, we don't create the typed inputs we don't need. So if it was like is between, or here are two new typed inputs that weren't there before, we defer creating those elements until we really need them. So the way it does that is whenever we add an item, it creates these inner functions which can do the work to insert that input, and it what does it do? It basically calls those functions as needed down here. But it's very wasteful to redefine these functions for every rule, because when you look at what is in these functions, it's actually identical. They're identical. It just needs the row to insert that element on. So what we're going to do is we're going to move each of these functions carefully up here. But now we're outside the scope of the add item, so this row isn't defined. Well, we can solve that by passing in row. And if we go find wherever we call create value field, we just make sure we pass in the row we want to add it in. So that just, we know row is in scope at this point, so that's going to do the right thing. Okay, so that's moved one. We've just got a few more to do. So we are going to grab all of these. Stick them in here. Then just a lot of copy and paste searches. So again, you can see here it gets appended to row, so we'll pass row in. And then we are going to go find wherever we call create num field without any arguments, we are now going to call it with row. And just do a global search and replace. Likewise, create exp value. Like I said, I've done this optimization before, so I have a bit of confidence in the way the fact I'm just doing this global search and replace. I'm not sort of manually verifying. It's because we already know this is right. So this one is row 3 and label. That's a little, yeah. Okay, it's a bit of a cheat, but we're going to pass that in as well. Yeah, not crazy about it, but so now wherever that gets row 3 and label. Well, that's interesting. That doesn't actually get called anywhere. Let's have a look. If I do this is between, yeah, sure enough, there is no and label appearing. So that's been broken for a period of time. So we, in a minute, we'll we need to go figure out where that got broken or where that call should be. But let's just do our last one of these guys. In fact, because we know the and label, between and label, that wants to get added immediately before create between value 2 field. So I think what we can do I think it's right to say immediately before calling. Is this right to say? Yeah, in fact, a better way of saying it is if we're going to call this and add it to row 3, then may as well because we don't actually need to return this label to do anything. We can just add it to row 3 there, and we just need to make sure we pass in and label as a second argument to that function. Which is a bit silly because it's not a dynamic label. It doesn't ever vary, it's just static text, but for scoping reasons, that's easier. Let's refresh and see what we make of that. Oh, errors. What have I screwed up? Previous value type is not defined. Ah, yeah, so all of these typed inputs have this previous value type, but previous value type is here. And again, so the tricky thing is it needs to do a message catalog lookup, which is why, and it does it with a this dot underscore, which looks it up in the message catalog of this node. If I move this code outside, we obviously don't have this in scope anymore. But not to worry, because what we can do is we can do it the longhand way. So we can call red.underscore and then add node-red : to tell it which message catalog to load it from. So let's try that. And in fact, we could do the same trick with the and label. So let's just check. So previous value, good, that's working. So that change we just made is working. If I change this to is between, yep, got both, and now we have the label. Good, good. Yeah. All right, small steps, small improvements, getting there, which is nice. What's the next thing to do? The next thing to do is I want to improve the width calculations of this row. At the moment, there's, I bet in here, there is a resize item. Yeah. So we have a function called resize rule that, and I think I covered this on the previous stream. This takes responsibility for working out how big all the elements in that field should be and resizing them, which is a terrible way of doing it. So I'm just going to, what am I going to do? I'm going to, I think probably exactly what I did on the last live stream, so I apologize if we're watching this again, but we're going to remove resize rule as something we ever use. So let's have a look. I want to have different examples. I think those are the 3 primary examples, and I'll explain what I mean later. Okay. And when I resize, nothing resizes. Yeah, so that's kind of, everything's just being its default size and not growing as you would want it to. So let's fix it. What have we got? We have got some rows. Let's get rid of that function, that resize function. We don't want that anymore. One of the problems, well, one of the reasons for all of this is that the typed input widget used to not handle dynamic resizing. It used to be you had to tell it to resize because it had some JavaScript code dealing with resizing the different elements. That went by the wayside some time ago and is so now it uses Flexbox, which is nice, which means it automatically resizes. We don't have to have custom code, and I'm sort of gradually updating the nodes. I did the change node in the week actually to do some better dynamic Flexbox, well, CSS based resizing, and got rid of a whole bunch of code, which is good. So what have we got here? We've got rows. These 3 rows are, if we inspect the rule, I think it's these 3 rows. So the first one is the primary row. Then we've got the one which contains, let's have a look if we, yeah, so we have a whole row who only contains the ignore case checkbox for the matches regex option. And then we've got a row which is empty, but if I change it to is between, I think, then that 3rd row contains the and label and the and value. So row is the main row, row 2 is purely that checkbox, and row 3 is the and label plus the second input for the is between. Okay. So what do we want to do? Firstly, we want all of these to be Flexbox layout. So Flexbox means we can tell it to fill the space, and is much nicer. So we're going to set the display to flex on that one. I think we can set that on all of them. Okay. Then we have the select box, which at the moment is hard-coded to a single size, which isn't big enough for some of them, and is arguably too big for some of the others. So we'll come back to improving that in a minute, I think. Then, so that's all the select field. Then we've got what do we want to do? We now need to set the width of the input properly. So, well, we know where those inputs are getting created. They're getting created up here because we just moved them up here. And how should we go about it? Let's just hard code it in. What we want is this one to have flex grow set to 1. So for the value field, flex grow set to 1. What's going on there? has done something unexpected. Oh yeah, okay. This port label stuff. Did I do this last time? I'm sure it does feel like I'm treading ground. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because this was set to... for reasons things are getting out of order, which is due to the dynamically inserting stuff when we need it. Well, let's fix that. So what we want to do is row input cell. We're going to stick a div in with style set flex grow set to 1, so it's going to fill the available space. We'll append that to row. Then down here, wherever we're appending something to row, 20 results, crikey. So wherever we're calling one of those functions to insert its input, we want to actually insert it in that cell to get it into the right position. And there's rather a lot of them, which is... okay, I mean, there's a slight risk I'm going to miss one, so let's just search for... yeah. Okay, and then final span, which is the label, which is meant to be right at the edge with the arrow and the number. We don't want it to float. Let's have a look at that. Okay, getting there. So it's not... okay, this typed input isn't growing, but the reason it's not growing is we haven't told it to grow. The div it's in is growing, but what we now want is all of these inputs to have their width set to 100%. Basically, we want them to fill the horizontal space they have available to them. Okay, so that's looking better. Yeah, a bit of margining needed, but that's okay. If we set this to is between, yeah, it might be nice to have that vertically centered. I'm getting deja vu. I'm sure I covered a lot of this last time, but the key thing is we're not putting it into the tree structure like I did last time. But this refactoring is healthy. It is going to improve. It'll make it easier to do that other stuff later. Here we have it. So here's the final span. Margin top. Oh, I'm not convinced we want that. Let's just... if I take off margin top 6, yeah, it moves up. Okay. But we do certainly want margin left of, say, 6. Now there's some overlap going on. What's going on there? It's got... oh, right. These guys, we don't want to have the margin on the input inside its container. The container should have the margin so that the flex box takes it into account properly. Oops. So wherever it was, I set up that cell. this is where we want the margin left to be 5. And here we want margin left to be, call it 5 as well. Hey Cliffo, should the name property boxes grow too? Yeah, we can take care of that in a minute. So everything looks a bit better. Right, but let's just focus on these rules. They are working where we have the single row. Now let's do the between case, which was row 3. In fact, if I change that to is between, grow, yeah. So we want anything to do with row 3 we now want to improve. So row 3, we've already got display set to flex. And then, in fact, all of the content of row 3 is set up in that function up here. Is that true? So what? Row 3, yeah, so it's got this ridiculous padding left of 102 to get it just so, which is ridiculous. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of that padding left. Change that to a div because we want it to be an inline block. Then that gets added to row 3. So row 3 has flexbox set. Then same as we did before. We're going to just create a containing div for that second input, and we're going to set its style to flex grow, and then I imagine there'll be some margin stuff to deal with, which we'll have a look at in a minute. Pen that to row 3, which is the row we're adding this to. Then this input we will stick in that cell, and we want to set its width to 100%. Okay, so that's working, sort of. I mean, it's doing exactly what we've asked it to do. This whole row is now the label which doesn't grow plus the input which does grow. However, it highlights the fact that this arrow 2 needs to not be in this top row. It actually needs to be we need to have it. Oh, I've just got to get on and do it rather than talk about it because it's already 9:10. So I've lost the code. Here it is. Right. So input rows that we're going to set this guy as the actual container. We want to set its display to flex. Then we're going to add in a container for these rows to sit in. And we will set flex grow to 1 on those. So each of these rows, rather than add to the container, we now add to the input rows. And the input rows we append to the container. Then, wherever our final span is, rather than add it to row, we add it to the container. Just, break that up a bit. So now, cool. So now you can, we've sort of restored the right-hand edge of this box. It would be nice if this arrow was centered vertically, which Flexbox makes trivial. Which is it? We want, I say it makes it trivial. My brain goes blank. We want set align items to center. Yep. Okay, so the arrow's now centered, except you can see it's off center. Centered, but it's off center, and that's because of this silly margin top of 6 pixels, which was there previously to try and pixel push it around. Yeah, it's always nice to get rid of that sort of margin pushing around, because now it's properly centered aligned. Although, I do actually think that now looks a little odd. Does that look odd? No, I'm going to forge ahead. So what we now need to fix is this row, that we want this and to be pretty much the same width as the select box. So let's go back up to where that's created. Here, so this is the and label. So we're going to set start on that, the width, say 120. I know we're trying to avoid hard coding widths, but sometimes. And then this guy needs a margin of, not all the way around, we just want a margin on the left hand edge. Cool. Not quite so cool. So what width is this? So that is 120, plus this one has the extra margin of 5. What's happened there? Let me just... There. So the select box has got a margin left of 5, which I don't see any good reason for it to have. And, well, the word and is in entirely the wrong place. That should be over. We want to right align that text, which is this guy. Text align right. And I'll reload so you can see that. And you can see the and is not vertically aligned in this row. And again, Flexbox makes that. Whereas before I would be adding a margin top just to nudge it down a few pixels. We laugh in the face of margin top and we set align, oh, which one? Yeah, align items center on the row. Yay, so that and is now centered, which looks good. They all grow as needed, which is nice. Okay, one more thing. It would be nice not to lose, well, it's only true matches regex in English, let alone German, which on I believe takes up on average a third extra horizontal space, which we always have to be mindful of. But even in the English, this 120 wide cell is not always quite big enough. So what can we do about that? Well, whereas before there was some logic that based on the value would resize it as part of all the resizing rules, we're going to actually add some logic. So here we have the change handler for the select field. I'm going to ignore that code. What we're going to do down here what we're going to do is what we want to do is find the text of the label and set some sort of breakpoints to determine the width of the select field. So we've got the value, but that's the internal value. We haven't got the actual text of the label. So how do you get the text of the select box? What I think we do, in fact, I'm gonna, if I do select and no, we want this select box. So what's select? We want to find option is it yay, I knew I'd get there. So we're finding the selected option and then we get its text, and that will give us its actual label. So that's the selected label. Then what we can say is going to pick some perhaps arbitrary breakpoints in terms of how many characters, but we know we've got a whole bunch of them. So we can just reduce the Cliff. It says, can you cheat again and just reduce the left-right padding in the drop-down field? It's only slightly out. Well, it's not padding in this instance. We're explicitly setting the width. So the cheat we're doing is changing the width. So sorry, selected label dot length is less than, say, 5. Let's see what feels comfortable for the width. So you can see here we've got it to 120. Ooh, don't want it as low as 20. Don't do that either. It's 60. Is that gonna? Yeah. So if it's, let's say less than or equal to 5. Select field dot width 50. Else if selected label dot length, because we have the okay, so where does it break? Matches regex breaks, which is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13. So I'm going to say if it's less or equal to 5, set it 50 wide. If it's greater than to 12, select field dot width, say 150. else we'll select field dot width 120 back to its default. So we've got rid of the resize rule function, and yes, okay, we're adding in some more logic that will dynamically resize it. Oh, that's too big. They're too big. Okay, let's. Yeah, matches regex. How long is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 164. Oh, yeah, okay. Outer width. Because we have padding. So, matches regex. I'm proposing to set that to, what do I say, 50? But yeah, so 120 is only just neither innate desire to hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I think if it's greater than 12, and again being sorry, I'm just trying to think the best way around of doing this. And this is silly. This is pixel pushing at its worst, but what I'm actually going to do is, so if it's less than 5, we'll set it down to 50. If it's less than 12, we'll set it to 120. Otherwise, we'll set it to auto. Because then for those couple that are somewhat extremes, yeah, I think that's okay. But the key thing is all the other fields are sort of resizing to look okay. Awesome. Yeah, I could do char length time 8 pixels. They're not monospaced fonts, so auto as a fallback. Just make yourself as big as you need to be. And because we have all the flexbox stuff working, everything else will just automatically lay itself out and line up. So, okay. What else do we talk about doing? So we talked about setting the property field, need to sort row 3 and layout. So what was row 3 is between. Yeah, no, I think row 3, I think we're okay. Row 3 is laying out okay. You know what, there's part of me feels when I shrink those down that do we like them shrinking that much? I don't think I like them shrinking quite as much as that. They just feel, it just makes them, yeah, a bit too squashed. Okay. Yeah, so the only other thing is the name and the property field, which don't resize like everything else resizes. So let's just fix them up. Which are all up here. And yeah, it's because of our default styling. Width by default is 70%. That was just a choice made 10 years ago, 11 years ago. Something for another day. We will set this to width calc of 100% minus 120, I think. In fact, no, not in fact. Yes, that's almost done it. That will do it, 105. So we do it for that guy, and we do it for... In fact, here you can see the width, 70%. It's just... So Steve says, back on the original wish item, if we can't achieve some kind of smart duplicate, then perhaps autofocus the added type input with a copy of the previous value for the highlights. Oh yeah, sort of lost track of the original reason of what we're actually doing here. So just to reiterate, so that's set to number and you hit add and it, okay, so it's at least it's now copying over the value. Let's just conscious of the time, and I've just heard the front door close, which means it's almost time for a cup of tea and this week's episode of The Walking Dead. So let's go find briefly. So here we had the code that does the work. Let's first try the focus thing, because I think having it autofocus that field would be useful and uncontroversial. But we only want it to try and focus that field if we're adding a new one, so which is what this if is about. So we'll say focus value field. By default, set that to false. But if we're in here, we're adding a new one, so we'll set that to true. Then I think it's in this select field. Just looking through all of this. Field focus. Right, so if it's in between, then the field to focus is going to be the between value field. For this one, hold on, field, no, got my variable names mixed up. Field to focus. So this is all the logic that works out which ones should be shown and not shown based on the type. Because it shows different inputs, we need to know which one to try to show. If indeed we're going to try to show any. Okay, so it's done all that, done all that, done all that. Oh. Yeah, so then by the time we get down here, if we in fact, yeah. I don't know what that's going to do. Filter focus.focus. Is that going to do it? Not sure what that does with the typed inputs. No. Let me just check with the docs for typed input. How have we got a function to focus the input? I think this might be beyond what I can quickly get going in the next couple of minutes, but I will. That's what I should have done. Yeah, we don't provide a way to focus the typed input directly. I thought we did. Why don't we? If in doubt, set timeout to break the event loop and no. Okay, the principle's there. I'm going to wrap up here, but that's suddenly getting that focused will reduce clicks needed. In terms of what you suggest, Steve, about copying the previous value and pre-selecting the text, interesting idea. I'll have a play. Need to make sure, there might be for some types that doesn't make sense. I don't know. But yeah, I'll have a play with that and see where we get to. But for now, that will do for now. Quite successful, I think, just improving the layout. You don't get the jitters on the widths as you resize because it's now all being done in CSS. There's no JavaScript involved, which is always a benefit. And yeah, a lot of that refactoring will definitely get into 2.1. Or everything you've seen will get into 2.1. I won't forget to commit this one, Noxy Boy. And also, this will lay the groundwork for changing this to a tree list and allowing compound rules and that type of stuff in the future. Whether that future is next week, I don't know. Cool. Thanks, everyone. 2.1 beta, touchwood, later this week. There's a few bits and pieces that outstanding that would be... I'd like to get them into a beta, but I don't think they're going to be quite ready for this week. But I'd like to get the beta out this week. So, yeah, I suspect we'll have a beta refresh and with some more extra goodness in. But yeah, keep your eyes out for 2.1. It's a good one. It's a lot of fun. So with that, I'm going to say good night all. Have a great week. I will be back same time, same place next week. And yeah, come with your suggestions about what you want to see me hack on. Let me know in the week if there's anything particular you'd like to see me poke around at. If there's any areas of the code you're interested in watching me hack around, do something interesting in, then do ask ahead of time. That's always, suggestions always welcome. So good night all. Take care. See you soon. Bye.